Have you ever walked out of a room, quietly, without slamming the door, without a final word, just silence? And yet, that silence echoed louder than any scream you've ever let out. You didn't say anything. You just stopped explaining, stopped begging, stopped trying to be understood. And in that stillness, something shifted deep inside them, but deeper still, something began to shift inside you. That's the moment narcissists can't handle. The moment when your voice, once used to soothe, to defend, to apologize for things that weren't even your fault, goes quiet. Because silence, when it's no longer used to avoid conflict, but to reclaim your own peace, is the one thing they can't manipulate. You think confrontation hurts them. You think shouting your truth, listing every wound, every betrayal, might finally make them see. Number, it never does. They don't feel your words the way you do. They feel control slipping. But when you go quiet, truly quiet, not out of fear, but out of clarity, they feel something else. They feel the loss of power, and that cuts deeper than any truth you could scream. Today, we're stepping into that silence together. You might not even know why you're still hurting, why your body tenses when your phone lights up, why part of you still wants to just explain one more time. But I promise you this, your silence is not weakness. It's the loudest self-love you've ever spoken. We're going to walk through why this silence shatters them and rebuilds you. But this isn't about revenge. It's about truth. About understanding your own worth without the need for them to confirm it. Let's untangle the threads of manipulation. Let's pull away from the gaslighting, the confusion, the nights spent overthinking every word you said. And maybe, just maybe, you'll realize that the version of you who stayed quiet wasn't broken. She was wise. She was choosing herself. If you've ever felt like you lost yourself trying to be enough for someone who never really saw you, this is for you. Take a deep breath. You're not alone here. And if you find pieces of yourself in what you hear, if you feel something settle in your chest, some deep part of you whispering, yes, that's it, subscribe, like, stay. Because there's more where this came from. More truth, more healing, more space to be heard even in silence. There's a kind of grief that no one talks about. It's not the kind you feel when someone leaves. It's the kind you feel when someone stays just long enough to undo you. You try to love them, really love them, the way only someone who's been hurt before can love. With effort, with softness, with that stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll see how much you care and treat you better. But when you love a narcissist, your love becomes fuel. Not warmth, not comfort, not connection, just power. They don't see your heart, they see your supply. And they feed off it. Every apology you whisper for things they did. Every text you send trying to fix what you didn't break. Every moment you doubt your own memory, your own feelings, your own gut instinct. They notice, they store it, they build themselves on top of your confusion. And they convince you that silence means giving up. But what they never expect is that one day, your silence doesn't come from fear. It comes from knowing. Knowing that no explanation will ever be enough for someone who never intended to understand you. And so, without a plan, without a script, without even realizing it fully, you stop talking. You stop defending yourself. You stop arguing with their distorted truths. You stop feeding the cycle that's been draining you day after day. And for the first time in a long time, there's peace. Strange, uncomfortable peace. The kind that makes you wonder, am I doing the right thing? But you are. Because narcissists don't crumble from confrontation. They thrive on it. They feed on chaos, on the drama, on your reactions. It keeps them in the center. It keeps them relevant. But silence is a locked door they can't pick. They'll circle back, of course. They always do. Maybe not right away. Maybe not in the way you expect. But they'll test the waters. A casual message. A hey, just checking in. A meme. A song. A birthday text. Innocent, but strategic. They want to know if you're still open. If they still have a way in. If the silence is a pause or a goodbye. Because when you go quiet, they have to face the mirror. And narcissists don't like mirrors that don't reflect back their version of reality. They want noise. They want your reactions, your pain, your love, even your anger. Because it all means one thing. They still matter to you. But silence, it says you matter more to yourself. And that is unbearable to someone who only felt powerful when you were small. They never thought you'd stop. That's the part they can't wrap their mind around. Because in the beginning, you were so open, so willing, so beautifully vulnerable. You let them in, thinking they would treat your softness with care. But to them, it was just an entry point, a test. And when you kept giving love, forgiveness, explanations, chances, they kept taking. Because that's what they do. They don't bond through love. They bond through control. So when you finally went quiet, it didn't just confuse them, it terrified them. Not because they lost your love, but because they lost the leash. And suddenly, They were alone with their own emptiness. No one to twist, no one to mold, no one to dance around their moods or manage their ego, just the sound of your absence. And here's the secret they'll never admit. They need you more than you ever needed them, not the real you, but the version they sculpted. The one who apologized too much, who second-guessed herself, who stayed. That version made them feel powerful, but the real you, the you who's quiet now, you are dangerous, because silence is a boundary they can't argue with, a refusal they can't guilt trip, a truth they can't twist. And so, when they realize they can't provoke you anymore, they change tactics. They'll try to look wounded. They'll act like the victim. Suddenly, they're sorry. They miss you. They're working on themselves. They just want to talk. But if you listen closely, it's not your healing they care about. It's their access. Because silence isn't just a rejection of them, it's a reclaiming of yourself. And that is the one thing they never prepared for. They counted on your loyalty, your guilt, your tendency to forgive too soon, to love too hard, to keep the peace even when your own heart was bleeding. But something shifted. Maybe it was the way your stomach sank every time they texted. Maybe it was the night you cried yourself to sleep and promised never again. Maybe it was that moment, small but final, when you realized no matter what you say, they don't hear you. So you stopped saying anything, and now they're screaming into the silence, not with words but with manipulations, with tactics, with desperate attempts to pull you back into the game. But here's the power of silence. You don't have to play anymore. You can let the message sit unanswered. You can let them wonder. You can let yourself breathe. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like a confrontation. It looks like nothing. And that nothing, that's everything. You always thought closure would come in a conversation, a final one. The one where you say everything, where they finally listen, where the puzzle pieces fall into place and you walk away with your head high, heart clean. But that moment never came, because people like them don't give closure. They avoid it, delay it, twist it, and then blame you for needing it. So eventually, you learn to give it to yourself, not through words, but through silence, through the choice to no longer need their permission to let go. That kind of closure doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly. It comes in the stillness after you leave their message unread. In the morning you wake up and they're not the first thought in your head. In the soft moment you realize you no longer need them to understand, because you finally understand yourself, and it hurts. Let's not pretend it doesn't. There's nothing glamorous about this part. It's lonely. It's confusing. You question yourself constantly. Was I too harsh? What if I'd said it differently? Am I the narcissist? That's what they've trained you to do, to doubt your own sanity. But deep down, you know the truth. It doesn't matter what you said. It never mattered how gentle, how loving, how patient you were. The goalposts always moved. The rules always changed, because it was never about love. It was about power. And when love becomes a battlefield, silence is your exit. It's not the silence of giving up. It's the silence of waking up. You start to see things you couldn't before. The patterns, the emotional traps, the way they used your empathy against you, the way they always needed to be the center, even if it meant crushing your spirit. And little by little, your silence becomes louder. It speaks in the way you no longer react, in the way you protect your peace without apology, in the way you choose not to respond, not because you're weak, but because you're done explaining your worth. They don't know what to do with that. They poke, prod, try to re-enter. They might even say all the things you wished they'd said months ago, but the timing's off. The spell's broken. You've changed. You're no longer available for conversations that harm you. No longer willing to water dead plants. No longer desperate for someone who only loved the idea of controlling you. And when they realize they've lost their grip, they panic. Not out loud, of course. That would mean showing their hand. No, they'll wear the mask a little longer, act like they're fine, like they moved on. But deep inside, they're spiraling, because you didn't slam the door. You closed it quietly and locked it. There's a moment after the silence has settled when you expect to feel free, and instead, you feel hollow. Because walking away from someone who made you question your worth doesn't just leave behind pain, it leaves behind a version of you. The version who waited, who stayed, who tried, who hoped. You grieve her. You miss the girl who bent over backwards to make things work, even when everything inside her said, "This is hurting me." You miss how much she believed, how deeply she loved, how endlessly she gave. But you can't be her anymore. And that's not failure. That's growth. The silence hurts. Not just because you're ignoring them, but because you're facing yourself. The truth, the loneliness, the echoes of everything you swallowed to keep the peace. People talk about narcissists like monsters, but they don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like love, like charm, like the one. They hold your hand and look you in the eyes. They remember your favorite song. They study your insecurities so they can protect or exploit depending on what they need that day. And the worst part is, some part of you still loves them, not the real them, but the illusion, the dream. The version they sold you in the beginning. The one who said all the right things, made you feel seen, made you feel chosen. But you were never truly chosen. You were targeted because your empathy, your depth, your softness, it wasn't invisible to them. It was valuable. And now, your silence threatens that value. You are no longer theirs to shape, so they panic behind the mask. They scramble for control. They might start to mimic healing, mimic growth, mimic the version of themselves you always hoped they'd be. But here's the difference now. You see it. The performance doesn't work anymore. You hear the undertones, the manipulation in disguise. You notice how apologies come with expectations, how kindness comes with strings, how their growth only exists when they're losing access to you, so you don't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because you've learned. You've learned that peace doesn't come from fixing people who broke you. It comes from fixing the belief that you had to be broken to be loved. You were never too much. You were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. And now, in this silence, you're answering your own heart. It's not empty anymore. It's sacred. There's something sacred about the moment you no longer flinch when their name comes up. Not because you've forgotten, but because you've finally remembered yourself. That's the quiet power of silence. It doesn't rush you. It doesn't demand revenge. It simply gives you space to return to the parts of yourself you buried just to survive them. And oh, how many parts you buried. The girl who laughed too loudly, the woman who asked too many questions, the one who wanted softness, presence, commitment. You learned to quiet her, didn't you? To shrink in the face of their disapproval, to tiptoe around moods that changed like the wind, to be the steady one, the strong one, the one who made everything okay. And now, without even realizing it, you've begun unburying her. Not with grand gestures, but in tiny rebellions. You leave the house without telling anyone. You wear what makes you feel beautiful. You stop apologizing for needing rest, for needing space, for needing more. That's what silence gave you. Time to notice how much of yourself you had to lose, just to be tolerated. And the rage that comes with that realization is not something to be ashamed of. It's holy. It's your inner voice returning. Because somewhere in the noise of trying to be enough for them, you stopped listening to your own cries for help. You kept pushing, kept giving, kept believing their moods were your responsibility. But now, you see it, and more than that, you see yourself. You are not difficult. You are not too emotional. You are not broken. You were reacting to emotional starvation, to gaslighting, to the slow erosion of your self-worth. And your silence now, it's not empty. It's full of everything they couldn't destroy. Your dignity, your clarity, your intuition, your truth. They feel it too. That's why they linger, why they watch, why they circle back with vague messages, testing the waters, hoping the silence was temporary, hoping they still live rent-free in your heart. But what they don't know is that the silence has become your home, a quiet, sacred place where your peace is no longer up for negotiation, where you don't need to prove your pain, where your healing doesn't rely on them admitting what they did. You're building something in that silence, not revenge, not spite, a self, one that no longer dances for crumbs, one that no longer confuses chaos with passion, one that understands real love does not need to be earned through suffering. And that terrifies them more than anything. They used to read you like a book. They knew which words would make you ache, which silences would make you spiral, which tiny kindnesses would pull you right back in. They could predict your responses like clockwork because they trained you to respond that way. But now, something's different. Now, they're met with stillness. They send a message, and it's met with nothing. They test the waters, and the waters don't ripple. They bait you with guilt, and you don't bite. That silence becomes unbearable for them, not because they care about your peace, but because they no longer have control over your mind. And for the first time, they have to face their own emptiness, because when you stop talking, they're left with themselves. And that's the part they've always avoided. See, they used you as a mirror, not to reflect love, but to reflect back the version of themselves they wanted to believe in. When they were cruel and you still stayed, it made them feel worthy. When they manipulated and you forgave, it made them feel powerful. When they neglected you and you chased them, it made them feel chosen. But now, the mirror is gone, and in its place is silence. A silence that forces them to see what you always saw, what you tried to love in spite of. The emptiness, the fear, the little child inside them who never grew up emotionally, still trying to feel big by making others feel small. But this isn't about them anymore. This is about you. Your silence now is an altar, a space where your old wounds are laid to rest, where your nervous system gets to untangle itself, where your heart no longer lives in fight or flight. You stop jumping when your phone buzzes. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop needing to be heard by someone who only ever listened to twist. And slowly, you begin to hear yourself again, the real you. The one who doesn't walk on eggshells. The one who cries without shame. The one who knows that love is not supposed to make you beg for safety. And no, this healing is not linear. Some days you miss them. Some days you miss who you thought they were. Some days the silence feels heavy, like grief pressing on your chest. But even on those days, you do not break the silence. Not out of pride, not out of punishment, but because you finally understood something they never could. Silence is not absence. Silence is presence with yourself. And in that presence, you're becoming whole again. You don't need a final apology. You don't need them to wake up one day and suddenly see all the damage they did. You don't need them to say, "You were right, I was wrong." Because even if they did, it wouldn't change anything. They can't give you back the years you spent doubting yourself. The nights you stayed awake trying to decode mixed signals. The tears you cried into a pillow so no one would hear. The version of you that was always waiting for a text, for affection, for basic decency. You've already been through enough, so instead, you let your silence do the healing. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, you tell your younger self, "I'm here now. I won't abandon you again." Every time you feel the ache of missing them, and still don't go back, you plant another seed of self-respect, and slowly, without even realizing it, you stop checking their page. You stop waiting for closure. You stop needing them to feel pain in order for you to feel peace. Because their suffering is not your justice, your healing is. And now, that healing has a voice. Not a loud one, not a shouting one, a quiet, steady one. The kind that comes through in soft mornings where you sip your coffee in silence and realize your body feels safe. In the way you laugh now fully, deeply. In how you no longer shrink in conversations. No longer second-guess your intuition. No longer offer explanations for your boundaries. You are no longer someone's emotional hostage. You're free, and that freedom was born in silence. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of sovereignty. Of no longer arguing with people committed to misunderstanding you. Of no longer dancing for crumbs. Of no longer playing games you never wanted to play in the first place. You're not cold. You're not heartless. You're healing. And healing doesn't always look like soft music and gentle tears. Sometimes healing is brutal, lonely, quiet. Sometimes healing is choosing yourself over and over again, even when it hurts. Even when you still love them. Even when a part of you wants to answer that text. But you don't. Because this time, love doesn't mean returning. It means refusing to abandon yourself again. And if you're here, if you're still listening, if something inside you has been whispering, "This is me," then you know this silence is not the end. It's the beginning of your voice, of your truth, of the life that waits on the other side of survival. You didn't lose them. You released them so you could finally return to you. Thank you for being here. If this moved you, if you felt seen, if you felt held, subscribe to this channel. Stay with us. There's more truth coming, more healing, and more silence that sets you free.